Okay, good stuff. So, well, firstly, thanks everybody for joining. It's always great to be on this workshop. We were discussing the numbers that attend just before we let everybody in, and it's amazing to think that we've built a kind of community of practice over the years around sharing labour market information. So it's particularly great this time because I think for those of you who are regularly regularly attend these workshops, you'll know that our usual approach is to give you a sort of sequence of highlights from the longer quarterly report that we publish online along with the workshop, and we go through each of the areas covered in the report in the time that we've got. Today is going to be slightly different because, well, actually quite a lot different because we're at a critical point in the development of the local skills improvement plan, as Nick mentioned earlier. And as part of that, we've needed to develop the evidence base around the labour market in some really significant ways. And we wanted to share the results of that with you today because beyond the reporting that we usually do every quarter, developing the evidence base for the LSIP has required us to reach into new areas, develop new insights and interrogate new data, and that generates, I think, a lot of interesting material for discussion. So we'll share those in the time that we've got today, and also as well the emerging priorities and areas for action that flow from that information. So without any further ado, we're going to go straight into the first bit of the session, which is to give you an update on what's been happening in the labour market in recent months. So we're going to reprise that kind of regular update of labour market information, give you the key messages before going into the other areas of evidential development around the LSIP that I just spoke about then. So that's how we're going to structure this. We're going to give you a quick overview of what's been happening and then go into a bit more depth across a number of areas of labour market investigation that we've been involved in over the last 3 months. So just starting with the key messages, it's been a bit of a mixed quarter since we last gathered on this workshop. Number of things to think about. So at an aggregate level, the labour market has been recovering from what were some of the weakest conditions in over a decade. So we've seen a rebound in the employment rate in the year to September. I know September sounds like a long time ago, and we do have more recent information which we'll talk about. But unfortunately, with some of the national data that we use, we need to wait for those longer time periods to really be confident of changes that have happened. So, but more about that in a bit. But alongside that kind of aggregate picture, we know that more recent information tells us that job postings, that's the amount of recruitment activity going on in the economy, that has fallen. It's continued to fall. And in the 6 months to January, it was at its lowest level in 4.5 years, and just under 20% below its long-term average. And in certain parts of the region in Cambridge, postings are near record lows. We also know from the quarterly economic survey that the Chamber publishes that business sentiment has weakened alongside that. So it shows the economic conditions have deteriorated in the last quarter of last year. And some of the things driving that include the global uncertainty, which extends to the current time period, but was also very much in evidence at the end of last year. But also the run-up to the budget in November as well was cited by a number of businesses taking part, as weighing on their decision-making. Artificial intelligence as well, increasing evidence that it's reshaping the demand for skills, particularly in the digital and tech areas of the economy, the kinds of skills that are required. And as we'll discuss, a big development since we last spoke has been the work on the draft local skills improvement plan, and we'll be going through some of the materials relating to that in just a short while. So Hannah, if you're going to take us through some of the headline data.
Yeah, we're going to have a fast and furious flick through all the data that we normally cover in the whole session. So on labour market participation, that the latest labour market statistics suggest that Cambridgeshire and Peterborough's labour markets recently recovered from the weakest conditions in over a decade. So in the year to September 2025, the region's employment rate increased to 78.9% from 76.7% in the previous year, which was an 11-year low. And rising employment was matched by falls in unemployment and economic inactivity, which was driven by a fall in the rate of inactive students to the second highest on record from the previous year's record high, and inactivity due to long-term sickness, which fell back to long-term average levels after also reaching a record high in the previous year. But just to know, and as Mike mentioned before, these are quite optimistic statistics, and others are more downbeat. So, for instance, the claimant count, which is a percentage of people claiming unemployment-related benefits, this has increased since the end of 2025 from 2.9 to 3.2%. And job postings data, which we'll touch on in a minute, they show that job postings have fallen to an almost 5-year low. So this chart shows rates of worklessness, so the percentage of people not, or adults not in employment or education. So the latest statistics suggest that these are below the England average in all areas of the region, but lowest in Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire and highest in the north of the region, so Peterborough, Huntingdonshire and Fenland. And a bit later we'll be talking a bit more about how the new LSIP will look to address the region's geographic disparities in employment and skills. Okay, so we have a national and local target to reach an 80% employment rate, and to do so, the latest stats suggest that 6,000 people would need to find or be supported into work to reach this rate. The data suggests that this would be achievable in theory. So on the supply side, there are over 28,000 people that are out of work and want to work, so well above the number of people needed to achieve an 80% employment rate. And on the demand side, there's been an average of almost 11,000 job postings per month across the region. So in theory, ample job opportunities. However, if we were trying to achieve an 80%, sorry, but just back to that slide, Mike, but if we're trying to achieve an 80% employment rate in local areas, there are demand side constraints in the north of the region, so in Peterborough, Huntingdonshire and Fenland, potentially insufficient job opportunities to support the number of people needed into work. So moving on to business sentiment now. So these are some results from Cambridgeshire Chamber's latest or quarterly economic survey for Q4 of 2025. So this showed that conditions weakened at the end of the year after stabilising in the previous quarter, and this was partly driven by budget uncertainty. So some respondents reported that uncertainty surrounding budget announcements had been weighing on confidence and delaying sales and orders. And as a result, investment intentions remain subdued. So investment plans for plant and machinery continue to decline, and investment plans for training turned marginally negative. Labour costs remained by far the biggest price pressure facing businesses, with 80% being more concerned about these than 3 months previously. However, there were some positive signs regarding workforce growth, with fewer businesses reporting recruitment difficulties, although remaining high at 78%, and fewer businesses expecting to reduce their workforce levels. So on to jobs now. So as we mentioned before, job postings data are currently downbeat, showing a 12% reduction in job postings in the 6 months to January compared to the previous 6 months, and that was sharper than the national decline of 6%. Job postings are also 9% lower than a year ago, 19% lower than the long-term average, and at their lowest for almost 5 years. And this fall was driven by Cambridge and Peterborough, so our urban districts where many of our jobs are concentrated, with job postings in Cambridge falling to the second lowest level since the earliest period of data in 2012. And this was driven by the continued fall in jobs for IT professionals, particularly programmers and software developers. And across the region, we've seen a significant de-skilling of job opportunities. So there's been a reduction in job opportunities for professional occupations, particularly programmers and software developers, and more job opportunities for elementary service and hospitality roles, such as kitchen and catering assistants, bar and catering supervisors, waiters and waitresses, and housekeepers. So here we have a slide on recruitment difficulties, which we measure using median posting duration of job posting. So how long a job posting is active, how long essentially it's taking to fill a job. So median posting duration increased to 23 days in the 6 months to January, which was up from 21 days in the previous 6 months, suggesting a slight increase in recruitment difficulties after falling for over a year, but this remained below the post-pandemic peak of 32 days in mid-2021. But recruitment difficulties remain high for telecoms installers, teaching and childcare workers, particularly teaching assistants, special educational needs teaching professionals, primary school teachers and childcare practitioners, for health and care workers, particularly specialist medical practitioners, specialist nurses and pharmacists, engineers, construction trades, transport drivers and operatives, and solicitors and lawyers. So we've got some new data releases for further education, apprenticeships and employer training to cover. So on apprenticeships, generally some very positive trends, with apprenticeship achievements up by 10% on the previous year and up by 26% on 2018-19 levels, which was a much stronger increase than nationally. And there were particularly strong increases in higher apprenticeship achievements, so up 500% on 2018-19 levels, and across subject areas in digital technologies, health and care and business apprenticeships. And apprenticeship starts suggest that these trends are set to continue, with a particularly strong increase in the number of people starting a digital technologies apprenticeship in 24-25. But on the downside, engineering and manufacturing technologies apprenticeship achievements have reduced by 26% over the past 6 years, against an overall increase in apprenticeship achievements of 26%. And starts data shows a reduction in the number of people starting a construction or engineering and manufacturing apprenticeship in 24-25. On further education, adult FE participation fell in 24-25 for the first time in 4 years, and this was due to a fall in FE education and training, which was partially offset by an increase in adult apprenticeship participation. But nevertheless, participation remained 19% above pre-pandemic levels. And on employer training, labour market statistics suggest that the percentage of employed residents participating in work-related training increased slightly over the previous year, but this was to the second lowest level on record after the previous year's record low, so still remaining very low on historical levels. And while production and public sector training increased, work-related training in private sector services fell to a new record low.
Thanks, Hannah. So we've just given a quick overview of some of the changes from the last quarter. And as I said at the beginning, as well as keeping track of things within the labour market, we've also been extending the evidence base for the region's activity around labour market policy. Through developing the LSIP evidence base in a number of different directions. And I'm going to present in as fast a way as we can, present some of the core findings from that. So just a quick word on what we've been up to. So the Chamber has put out a survey separate to the quarterly economic survey that the results of which you've just seen there. So we've got a dedicated LSIP survey which has been running for a number of months. So that's garnered over 200 responses from businesses. The Chamber of Commerce have also conducted bilateral interviews with, I believe, Nick, over 60 individual employers now. Is that right,
yes,
Nick?
It's well over 60. We've still got 60, some tidying up to do. 60. And you could basically say the survey's now at 300. 300,
right. So we've got 300 survey responses, over 60 bilateral interviews as well, a number of focus groups and events, interactive events that have generated information as well. What we've also been able to do is a deep dive into the recruitment activity of the priority sectors in the local growth plan that was published by the combined authority at the end of last year, and that sets the priorities, the framework for developing the LSIP. So there are 6 priority sectors, and what we were able to do was firstly expand our understanding of who the employers are in those sectors, and we were able to generate kind of sample frames, so lists of businesses, roughly between 200 and 400 active recruiters across each of those 6. Some quite a lot more, some less, but roughly about 200 to 400. And what we did was we were able to analyse their recruitment history, so all of their online job advertisements going back about 5 years. So we're talking many thousands of job postings, and that tells us a lot about what qualifications, what skills are being required in the marketplace, what jobs are in demand, which take longer to recruit than others. So we've had to bring all of that information together and synthesize it and draw out some key findings. And in the very short time we've got in this workshop, we're going to pull out a number of key themes from our work on the LSIP evidence base before then going into kind of what does that mean in terms of potential areas for action and priorities. So I'll start by talking about the employer survey that Nick referred to just there. So on about 300 responses, what have we learned from that? What we've learned is, firstly, that technical skills related to the job role are the most prevalent gap in applicants. Digital communications and problem-solving skills are going to be needed more in the future, not less. The greatest barrier to training is cost, followed by staff time. On-the-job training, online providers and independent private providers dominate so far as employers are concerned. The use of apprenticeships, further education colleges and universities, though important, remain relatively low in terms of incidence for the employers that we engage through the surveys. We know that employers do and want to engage more with education and training providers, and nearly 2/3 of those who've responded to the survey are engaged in some way or other with local schools, colleges or training providers, and 1/5 of those who are not engaged have expressed an interest in doing so. Another thing that's sort of quite interesting that's come out of it is around forward planning. So it's quite common for businesses to have plans for the future, but it's much less common for them to have developed plans relating to HR, skills planning and so on. So that is a gap that businesses have. Some of the most consistently reported issues across the roughly 60 bilateral interviews that the Chamber has conducted. Employability skills like communication is the single most common theme, the universal theme. In various different ways, evidence of a disconnect between what employers want and how they want to access education and the marketplace that they are confronted with. Digital and AI skills gaps. We see this across every sector that we performed interviews with. And I should say as well that the spread of interviews was informed by our understanding of who the active employers were across each of those 6 priority sectors. So we've got a good spread of interviews with companies from different sectors. A talk of fragmented and unstable funding, the importance of green skills and net zero transition in driving recruitment activity and thinking about skills. And this is something that is strongly backed up by the evidence, particularly around recruitment activity, and we'll talk more about that. The transport and geographic barriers, how important they are. Again, we'll say more about that, but Cambridgeshire faces some unique challenges in terms of access for many people to employment and to training, and that presents a challenge for policy. That I know the combined authority has developed a number of programmes in that regard. We might hear more about that later on. Social care and health won't surprise anybody on this call, as we talk about it every quarter, but there really is a crisis in recruitment in social care and health, and it's there in all of the statistics, but we also see it through the interactions that we have with employers in other sectors of the economy. It affects them too, through staff time lost to caring activities, the difficulty of recruiting in certain areas where care is a big driver of inactivity. For some sectors of the economy, the perception of what work and careers are actually like within those areas is a barrier to recruitment. And this is particularly true for example, in advanced manufacturing. And it's also potentially true of defence as well. The need for coordination in systems leadership, so a kind of plea for more coherence, easier navigation of the system, and for there to be visible leaders and organisers of that system. So those are some of the key themes. It would be difficult to do it justice, to be honest, given the amount of material that we've generated through these interviews, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of what was found. So we're going to do a quick canter now through the core findings of the evidence base for the LSIP. And as I say, the amount of material that has been gathered has been absolutely enormous. So do forgive us if we don't, if it feels like we're going through this quite quickly, but we have to prioritize somehow. So we've tried to distill it down into 10 core findings. So we'll just go through these quickly. So the first finding is really about the geographical, the economic geography of the region and how that displays itself in labour market statistics. There really is evidence of a strong divide between Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire on the one hand and the rest of the region on the other. And we see this in a number of different ways across the labour market. We see it in differences in worker productivity. We see it in commuting patterns. So places like Cambridge, for example, drawing in, being a net recipient of commuters. Other parts of the region like Fenland and East Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire, the opposite is true there. We see a strong pattern around economic inactivity, access to education along geographical lines, particularly access to places of learning, which is more challenging in the more rural parts of the region. And we've spoken to FE providers who may be spending anything up to £1 million a year on bus routes to bring students to campuses. So that's a kind of quite a clear demonstration of that geographical divide. Hannah, you're going to talk us through this briefly.
Yeah, so we'll just concentrate here on the map on the right. So this displays education and skills deprivation in neighbourhoods across the region. So this is a composite index of a number of different indicators, including school age, academic performance, pupil absence, and adult skills levels. So areas in light green are the least deprived areas in England, and the areas in dark blue are the most deprived. So this really highlights the region's north-south divide when it comes to education and skills performance, with Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire being among the least deprived education and skills deprived areas in England, but also with its own pockets of deprivation, such as the Fenland area of Cambridge. And with education skills deprivation being much more widespread in Peterborough and Fenland, and with also pockets of deprivation in Huntingdon. And when you combine all these neighbourhoods together, Fenland ranks as the most education and skills deprived local authority area in England. There are no green areas there whatsoever. All of its neighbourhoods rank within the 50% most education and skills deprived areas of England.
Hannah. And the second core finding is around the importance of replacement demand and population ageing. So it's really important to remember with, when we set priorities for skills, that the dominant driver of future labour needs is replacement. That is people leaving jobs to be replaced and firms seeking replacements for those who vacated the roles. That is the the norm. That is the big picture of recruitment, and something like 86% of the future workforce need is replacement demand. So obviously that has implications for places that are affected more than others by demographic aging, by early retirement. So we see high replacement demand also focused in certain parts of the economy. So it's a big challenge in industries like caring, in agriculture, transport. These are parts of the economy that see the highest replacement demand. And Hannah, you've got a few stats to talk through.
Yeah, so again, we'll just concentrate on the chart here on the right, which shows employment projections for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough for selected occupations. And the orange bar shows the projected employment growth, so overall change in numbers of jobs. And the red bar shows replacement demand, so numbers of people needed to replace leavers in existing jobs, for example, due to retirement. So caring personal service occupations have by far the highest projected employment requirement, and in particular the highest replacement demand requirement of any occupation. And even in occupations where overall employment is expected to fall, such as administrative and sales occupations, where we expect technology to be a key driver of reduced employment, people will still be needed to replace people that leave in existing jobs.
Thanks, Hannah. Another finding is just the backdrop to this skills improvement plan, but also the local growth plan published at the end of last year, which is the really frames the LSIP, is just that the big economic ambitions that are set out in the LGP. Achieving that is going to require overcoming some really adverse recent data about the economy. So in recent years, we've seen a slowdown in overall growth in the size of the economy. So economic output across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, the growth in that averaged 2.6% per annum between 2013 and 2018, but this fell to 1.4% in the years between 2018 and 2023, so 1.4% on average. So for the LGP's economic targets to be achieved, we're going to need to see a really big increase in the average speed of economic growth. If I bring that on to the next slide, Hannah.
Yeah, okay, so this chart shows that productivity in real terms, so adjusted to take account of inflation, has declined over the past few years, and this reflects a slow economic recovery from the pandemic, falling levels of business investment, as we mentioned earlier, and work-related training, and a de-skilling of available job opportunities. And the chart on the right again highlights the region's dual economy, with Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire performing much better in productivity growth terms than other areas of the region.
And the picture underneath those economic trends is one of structural shifts happening across the economy and cooling demand. We spoke earlier about how job postings, essentially the amount of recruitment activity, is below average, so I won't dwell on that. But what we are seeing is evidence that there is some structural changes happening, particularly in the recruitment for some digital roles, where the share of the labour market that can be accounted for by recruitment of programmers and software development professionals, that has almost halved in the space of a few years. So it's declined quite significantly, but at the same time as that has happened, we've seen big increases in demand for other types of roles. So, for example, big increase in the demand for AI skills, and we're already seeing evidence of automation reshaping the demand for some roles, such as in administrative and secretarial work, some customer service roles, for instance. And another thing that we're seeing is the demand for labour over the long term. So the forecasts that the UK government puts together for that, which goes down to a sectoral level, foresees a gradual increase in the share of recruitment activity that's focused on higher level skills. So essentially, a kind of the skills demand, within recruitment increasing over time. So Hannah, if you want to talk us through this next slide.
Yeah, so on the chart on the left shows employment projections by qualification level. So it highlights that the numbers of people, employed people with high level qualifications is expected to grow, particularly at levels 6 and 7. So that's bachelor's degree, degree apprenticeship level and master's degree level. While the number of people with no or low qualifications is expected to decline. And this reflects supply side factors such as younger people entering the workforce being more likely to hold a high level qualification than older people leaving the workforce, as well as demand side factors reflecting the projected change in the profile of jobs, as well as employers demanding more high-level skills as the workforce naturally becomes more highly qualified. We have noted a contradiction between this data and the trend that we're seeing within job postings at the moment. Fewer professional job opportunities and more opportunities at the lower skilled end, and this is something that we're committing to looking into a bit more over the coming months.
Thanks, Hannah. And staying on the theme of kind of what skills are being demanded. So through the analysis of vacancies data that we've done, and also as well through looking at the recruitment history across different sectors of the economy and noting which roles are in highest demand and which take longest to fill, we're seeing persistent shortages in some roles. So health workers, teachers, childcare workers, care workers, construction trades, and engineers, they face some of the most entrenched recruitment difficulties. Engineering and manufacturing apprenticeships, the number of successful completions of those has fallen, as we mentioned earlier, by 26% since 2018-19, against a backdrop of the number of increases, the increase in apprenticeship achievements across all subject areas increasing by 26%. So as we'll see in a minute, that's a bit of a challenge given some of the recruitment challenges in engineering and manufacturing. Hannah, if you want to talk us through this slide.
Yeah, so when it comes to recruitment difficulties, this slide highlights that engineers are in strong demand but hard to recruit for, which is compounded by a fall in engineering and manufacturing technologies apprenticeships. So our analysis of recruitment trends across the region's 6 priority sectors highlighted that mechanical engineers were among the hardest to recruit in 5 sectors, while electrical engineers were among the hardest to recruit occupations in 4. And when we looked at available technical education, we found that courses were widely available, but achievements had been comparatively low over the past 5 years. And as we mentioned earlier, and shown in the chart here as well, the number of engineering and manufacturing technologies apprenticeship achievements has declined by 26% over the past 6 years, against a 26% increase in all apprenticeship achievements.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm going to skip the next 2 slides because we've kind of covered them, I think, already. But Hannah, is there any, if you want to just quickly talk through this slide. So I skipped over those last 2 just because we covered them up front to some extent, but there's some interesting stuff on the slide, isn't there?
Yeah, so if you look at the chart on the right, this shows adult skills levels across the region. So you can see that Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire have above average rates of adult skills at all levels. East Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire have high rates of adults with at least a level 2 qualification, but below average rates at higher levels, so with level 3 and level 4 and above qualifications. And then we have Fenland and Peterborough. These have below average qualification rates at all levels, with a particularly low rate of adults in Fenland with a level 4 and above qualification at 16.7%, compared to 46.8% across England. And Peterborough has the highest cohort of adults without a level 2 qualification at 23,500 adults, which accounts for almost 40% of the region's adults that don't hold a level 2 qualification.
And turning to employer training and access to further education, we've seen a decade-long decline in employer training that's compounding the skills deficits that we see. So there's a number of statistics to back up the downbeat picture on employee training and the incidence of that. But on access to further education, so we know that there's quite a big challenge for many people in the region in physically accessing learning opportunities. So only about a third of 16 to 19-year-olds in East and South Cambs are within 30 minutes of an FE provider, and that's amongst the lowest in all of England. So, that's clearly going to be a challenge for the implementation of any skills program. So it's something that we need to keep in mind. Low demand for T-level placements. We know that few employers offer T-level placements, and from our survey and through interviews, internal capacity and cost appear to be the main barriers to that. But having said that, we've had positive feedback about the role that skills boot camps can play as a response to urgent need. So across a number of our different evidence work streams, skills boot camps identified as a kind of valued responsive mechanism. So Hannah, you've got a few things to talk through in the next slide.
Yeah, so again, if we look at the chart on the right, it shows the rates of businesses providing any training to staff. So this reduced from 73% in 2013 to just 60% in 2024, and that was a record low and a sharper fall than nationally. And if you look at different types of training, formal off-the-job training has declined most sharply, suggesting that employers are now less willing to take their employees out of their day-to-day activities for training activities.
Excellent. So I'm coming towards the end of our run through of core findings, but evolving skills demand in certain areas of the economy, particularly digital, green and AI. We've seen a really big turnover in the 50 most demanded skills between 2021 and 2025. So just sort of to give you an idea of this, across digital skills, we've seen a sharp fall in demand for some specialist programming skills. We've seen a big rise in demand for AI skills, but also basic digital skills like Microsoft Office 365, Excel, data visualization through Power BI, and also accounting software, and there may be a regulatory driver for that. Digital is now a cross-cutting requirement across all sectors, so it definitely pays to think about that, not just as a kind of driver of recruitment in the tech industry, but just really in every part of the economy. There is a digital skills dimension to it these days. In the green economy, green skills, green postings are a third above their longer term average. Over a third of regional employment is now in what you might call green affected occupations, and that's higher than the national average. And energy and clean tech, which was one of the local growth plan's priority sectors, the recruitment activity in that sector is really hot at the moment and well above its long-term average. On AI literacy, there's a number of different dimensions to it. There's a kind of foundational level of proficiency, a practical fluency, but also AI in the way is an important driver of the design of training and the delivery of training as well. So that's an important dimension to this. There isn't a sort of a credible local offer for practical AI in a business context, but that is true of the country as a whole. And frankly, we've encountered quite a lot of skepticism among businesses about just how easily you could create a course like that, just when things are moving so quickly. So, I know the Chamber and other organisations have great signposting services and workshops and kind of basic level competencies that you can learn through those. but actually some of the more detailed stuff, it's evolving so quickly that businesses are struggling to understand how to engage that on a skills level. So Hannah, on the next slide.
Yeah, okay, so the chart on the right shows the changing demand for digital skills within job postings. So while demand for some programming and coding skills has reduced, some digital skills currently represent larger shares of job postings than 5-year averages. And these include those relating to AI, so artificial intelligence generally, generative AI and machine learning, basic digital skills, so Microsoft applications such as Office, Excel and Outlook, data visualization applications, so Dashboard and Power BI, and also accounting software, so Xero, QuickBooks and accounting software more generally appearing here.
And finally, transferable skills. So picking up the theme from the slide that I showed earlier as the feedback from employers. So what you might call employability skills, those kind of basic skills that are required for competence in a job, that is common to all sectors of the economy. Those employability skills, they dominate the top skills in terms of the frequency with which they're cited in job adverts. So they account, I think, for all of the top 10 most requested skills across 5 years, and certainly for all of the time that we've been tracking it. So that continues to be a really important dimension of skills demand. Communication skills is a top skills demand. It's requested almost 5 times more than the leading specialised skill within job adverts, which is project management. And employers cite shortages among new entrants. Basic skills is a barrier to foundational economy jobs, so functional literacy, numeracy remain persistent barriers, particularly in areas of the economy like social care, for instance, other parts of the foundational economy. And we know that commercial understanding is a really important skill within knowledge-intensive roles. So knowledge-intensive businesses, when you look at their recruitment activity, that kind of demand for commercial savvy is there within the job advertisements. So that concludes the kind of the canter through the core findings from the LSIP's evidence base. And in the next few minutes, as we wrap things up, I'm just going to be talking through kind of what we've found at a high level against each of the priority sectors that are outlined in the local growth plan and that form an important part of the local skills improvement plan. So as I said earlier, what we've been able to do is pull together a list of active recruiters in each of the 6 sectors that you see there, and analyse their activity over a 5-year period. So what that tells us is which jobs they recruit in highest volumes, and of those which are hardest to fill. And I suppose the key thing to pull out there is mechanical engineers, electronics engineers really jump out as being a common one across a number of the sectors. But each has its own unique set of challenges. Hard to recruit occupations, we've outlined some of the key ones there across each of the 6. Another important thing to note is that for those job advertisements where a qualification is specified, a really high percentage of those for each of these sectors specifies qualifications required at level 6 and above, so essentially a degree level or higher. And that gets really high for life sciences, where there's a really high amount of kind of postgraduate level recruitment that drives that really high share of postings at degree level or above. So what we were then able to do is look at those jobs, as I say, that are both hard to recruit and being recruited where there's evidence of decent demand, and look at the technical educations that underpin those occupations and that may be required across those occupations, and then map those to local provision. It's a complex picture because in some cases, like agri-food and tech, the the way that the industry is structured means that there are national colleges and national specialised outfits that cater to particular roles. So the fact that there isn't one locally is not necessarily an indicator of a lack of capacity. So we have to treat this with a bit of careful interpretation. But what we've been able to do is build up a picture of where, for each of those sectors, there are technical education gaps that we will need to address in some way, shape, or form, whether that's through new capacity or whether that's through access programs of one kind or another. Each of those sectors has distinctive challenges relating to the labour market, and not all of them are to do with skills. So, for instance, in some cases it might be about perception. In other cases, it might simply be that they're competing with other parts of the economy for the same pool of labour. So they're in a kind of bidding war there and face rapid wage inflation in critical roles. So there's a varied picture, but what we've tried to do is pick out the key challenges and things to address across each of those sectors. The foundational and everyday economy, that's also priority within the local growth plan and is taken forward will be taken forward within this local skills improvement plan. So again, we did a similar exercise for these parts of our economy, and so we just pulled out some interesting facts against each of these. So, for example, in adult social care, as we spoke earlier, big crisis in recruitment there. High rate of turnover of staff within establishments, an aging workforce, and a really high demand for labour going forward with the demographic changes in our economy. Within education and childcare, some specific challenges around recruitment to special educational needs and really big increase for demand there. For drivers and logistics more generally, we've got some real challenges there with recruitment, and it underpins the other sectors that we just spoke about there. And construction trades are among the hardest to recruit. Obviously a challenge given the targets and aspirations that the region has around economic growth and housing supply. This could be something of a bottleneck there. So that kind of concludes the evidence really that we've been gathering ahead of the development of priorities for the LSIP. I'm just going to go through these emerging priorities very quickly, and then Nick, I'm going to hand back to you for the Q&A, if that's okay. I shall be doing that in a minute. But when you distill all of that evidence base, some priorities do emerge out of that, and the Chamber of Commerce and the Combined Authority working together have identified 7 draft priorities that, as I say, they're draft at this point because they're being developed in more detail, but really they fall into 3 buckets. Building higher level skills, so higher level skills, HE progression and lifelong learning, so expanding access to higher level and modular HE beyond Cambridge, particularly through ARU, Peterborough, and embed lifelong learning and degree level apprenticeships. So that we get that skills pipeline for those growth sectors, which, as we saw before, a lot of the recruitment activity is at level 6 and above. So we've got to fix that pipeline. Priority 2, growing apprenticeships for young people and reversing the decline in youth apprenticeships. We can do that through simplifying employer engagement, using skills boot camps, internships and foundation apprenticeships as on-ramps to skilled technical careers. Priority 3, fixing leaky talent pipelines in engineering, electrical, construction trades and advanced manufacturing, and really addressing that challenge that we saw of mechanical and electrical engineers being a common recruitment challenge across 5 of the 6 priority sectors. Strengthening foundations, so really doing what we can to support the foundational economy, so prioritising foundational vocational and employability skills in areas of greatest need. Priority 5, the youth guarantee, digital badging, transferable and employability skills, so embedding employability transferable digital and green skills within technical pathways, through an expanded digital badging system aligned to the Youth Guarantee, employer recognised micro-credentials. And finally, priority 6 and 7. So on the priority 6, we've got a load of really large infrastructure projects and commercial development sites, not just in our region, but also outside of it. So Universal near Bedford, for instance. These are going to put major demands on our labour market in terms of recruitment, in terms of demand for skills, and it needs to be drawn out as a kind of a priority in its own right, really, and making sure we've got the mechanisms in place so that those infrastructure projects and commercial sites can be successful. And then finally, the systems leadership piece, so providing clear systems leadership by helping employees navigate some big policy changes that are coming down the line, for instance, to the what is currently the apprenticeship levy, but what will be the growth and skills levy, and strengthening coordination between employers, providers, and career services. So I'm going to withdraw at that point, Nick, and hand back to you. I know we've gone through a lot, but hopefully we've got time for a Q&A.
Thanks, Mike. We are recording the session, but the Q&A doesn't get recorded or published at the end of it. So if people have got questions, don't worry. You won't be seen by anyone asking a question. The recording is purely so we can put Mike out there on and available on a later date for people to come back to. Does anybody have a question? If you'd like to raise your hand, I'll cue you in. No?
Have we beaten you all into submission? An enormous amount of slides.
That's fine. We can always put something in the chat. If you've got a question, put it in the chat, and I'll quickly go to the chat at the end of the session and see if there are any questions in there that we can quickly go back on. I'm going to introduce Nicola March, who's stepping in at the CPCA to because we lost our speaker to illness, bless her, and Nikki's very kindly picked up the baton this morning, and I understand Nikki's got some slides on some of the initiatives coming through the CPCA at the moment. So I'll go quiet and hand over to Nikki.
Good morning, everybody. My screen says I'm sharing, but I can't see that I'm sharing. Am I sharing? Fabulous. Fantastic. Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicola March. I'm the Employment and Skills Manager for the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, and I run the Employment and Skills team there. We are government funded, and we're basically here to help organisations recruit, retain and develop staff. We have a whole myriad of tailored solutions to drive business growth in our toolkit, and we just want to make sure that we are enabling businesses to grow their businesses, but also create some high quality employment opportunities for all. It's very simple to engage with us, and we have some fantastic incentives. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the incentives that we have going on at the moment that can help manage those workforce challenges that you're currently experiencing, and tell you about what grants and so forth that we have available, and some of the things that have already been mentioned. So one of our biggest things is our internships program. If you've not heard about our internship program, it's a fantastic way of bringing in new talent into your business. You can have a new employee for 6 weeks. We pay 100% of the salary up to national living wage or national minimum wage, depending on the age. But we know that that's not the whole cost for the business. So we also pay on top of that £100 a week subsidy for each week that the individual is on their internship. And that kind of helps to pay for tax, national insurance, PPE and any other costs. Depending on the age of the individual, these aren't internships in the traditional sense. So we do cover all roles, and they're not just young people in the first experience of the first year. Over 10% were over the age of 50, and the majority of them were between the age of 21 and 35. So we don't have an upper age limit, and as I said, it's for all roles. And individual interns can do up to 38 hours a week. You can see there the kind of the funding drawdown that's available for each internship. So there's 3 schemes. There's the 2 6-week fast track schemes for the 100% salary funded, or the 50% 12 weeks, which works out, as you can see, exactly the same money but spread over a longer period of time. It's really important to say that interns can do apprenticeships and other formal training. In fact, actually the majority of them do whilst they're on their internship. And we can also have other funding that we can stack with the internship to make it even more cost effective for your business to bring in an apprentice. We are there to support you in all of your needs. And most importantly, it was mentioned earlier as well, that interns can achieve digital badges, and they are digital badges aligned with the essential skills that our LSIP says that employers are looking for. So we always kind of align with the LSIP. We want to make sure that everything is joined up. With regards to digital badges, if you're not sure what they are, they're very simple things. So we have ours, as I said, aligned to the LSIP. We have a customer service one, problem solving, etc. So usually when I talk to employers, they're not necessarily interested in qualifications. We can see that some are interested in qualifications, but the majority of the employers are looking for someone who's going to turn up, do the job, think for themselves, and communication is very key, and that's kind of come across in the presentation that we've just heard. So all of our interns are able to gain digital badges in those skills, which means that they can then go on to accredit those skills to further employers, or if they stay with you, you're then setting the standard of what you're expecting, especially when it comes to young people. We have last month officially launched a new suite of digital badges. These digital badges are not only used for our internships, they are free and available for you to use with any of your employees, and are around the same things. And it just gives you a really simple and practical way to kind of set those standards and recognize you can use them for career pathways and progressions as well. I think it's really important, as I said earlier, we have some other grants that are available for our Youth Guarantee Trailblazer. We're very lucky in that we're 1 in 8 areas in the UK that has Youth Guarantee Trailblazer funding. And for apprenticeships, if you're a SME that hasn't recruited an apprentice in the last 12 months, you could be entitled to up to £4,000 grant to take on a young apprentice between the ages of 16 to 18. Now, this is on top of the £1,000 grant that's currently available from the government, and I think that they are looking to increase that as well. So ours are always, stackable, so we can stack them on top. There's certain things that obviously we can't use at the same time, but the majority of them can be used at the same time as government grants. This is a fantastic opportunity. So our guys, and I know that I've got a couple, or at least one of them on the call, are there to support all employers with apprenticeships, right from, what standards and what's right for you as an organization, what is it that you actually need, who the best providers are, given the options, who delivers what, how and when. They can also help you to access levy share to make sure that your apprenticeships is fully funded, or if you have excess levy, we're always happy to take that off your hands and share it with local employers as well. And also help you to access not only our grants, but other local grants and national grant schemes as well. So we always want to make sure that we do our best to make sure that you have everything that you need and you can tap into what's available. The skills landscape can be very confusing, and our guys are there to help take some of the confusion out. We also have some higher technical grants as well. for employers that have under 21s within 9 months of employment. Now, these are usually for HNCs, HNDs, level 4 qualifications, and we have a grant of £2,000 to offer to local businesses of any size within the region. What's really interesting and the best part of my job is when I get to hear all of the wonderful success stories and all the information that kind of comes through. The success stories are really what makes it. If you want to find out how our internships and apprenticeships are really helping not only individuals and residents within the region, but the businesses that we support, please do check out, and I will send these slides over to Nick so that he can share them all. Some such. Check out the success stories. Just some notable success recently that we've had. We've had a really good success with M&M Flowers, who working with our Youth Guarantee Trailblazer. Sorry, I'm picking up someone's.
Director manager this.
Sorry. Yep. Thank you. So we've had some really good feedback. So working with Inspire to Ignite, who are working on our Youth Guarantee Trailblazer, and they were working with M&M Flowers. They have done some industry to employment days, some work experience, and from that, 8 people attended their work experience day. 2 of them have gone on to be recognised and approached about an internships, and 6 of them were actually offered permanent roles. We also kind of align with the Job Centre, working on the SWAPS programme. So they have a work experience program where you can have an individual come into your business and do a work trial, and then from there we can work with the employers to take them on through an internship. We've done this recently with Chef de la Maison, who's had some really good people on work experience that he wants to take on, and he will be taking 2 of them onto an internship very soon, and then also again, stacking the opportunities that we have with regards to boot camps, working with constructive pathways. We have had an opportunity where individuals have gone through a boot camp to get their HGV driver licenses, which is really, really exciting, and then afterwards have gone on to an internship. So all but one of the interns at the end of the internship remained with Mick George. It was a relationship between Mick George Constructive Pathways and ourselves. Has remained with Mick George as a new HGV driver, and I can see that HGV was one of those areas that is badly needed in the area. And the other person has gone on to their job of their dream. It wasn't a HGV driver job, but it is the job of their dream in pharmaceuticals. So some fantastic success stories. And that's it from me, unless anyone's got any questions.